Something shifted in the opposition calculation of 2027 in the last 48 hours. Not a rumor, not a political leak from a faceless source. A public, on-camera statement from Atiku Abubakar, the man who has run for president 6 times, the man who finished second in 2023 with 6.9 million votes, the man whose northern machine is the single most important piece of infrastructure the ADC coalition has, sitting down on Arise News and saying without hesitation, yes, I will step aside for any winner if Peter Obi is a contender. Of course, what is difficult there? It is democracy. 4 sentences, and yet they contain the most consequential political signal in Nigeria's 2027 pre-election cycle so far. Because if Atiku steps aside for Peter Obi, if the most experienced northern political operator of his generation publicly concedes the presidential slot to the Igbo candidate from Anambra, then 2 questions immediately dominate the 2027 calculation. Who sits on that ticket beside Obi as running mate, and what is the deal that was struck in private to produce this extraordinary public concession? AFRONEWSHQ has mapped both questions, and the answer to the running mate question, based on converging intelligence from multiple ADC coalition sources, from the public statements of the key actors, and from the constitutional arithmetic of what an Obi presidential ticket actually needs to win, points to one name, one combination, one deal that, if confirmed, would be the most strategically constructed presidential ticket Nigeria has seen since Obasanjo Atiku in 1999. Today, we are going to build that analysis precisely, from the Atiku concession to the ticket logic, to the running mate intelligence, to the coalition arithmetic, and finally to what Tinubu's Aso Rock is doing right now in response to a development they did not model. Most channels will give you the name and move on. We give you the architecture of why that name changes everything. If you've never been here before, you just found Nigeria's most analytical political channel. Subscribe, because what comes next will reshape how you read every 2027 political headline for the rest of this year. The statement that changes the coalition mathematics. On April 15, 2026, yesterday as this video goes out, Atiku Abubakar sat before cameras on Arise News and answered a direct question about whether he would step aside if Peter Obi wins the ADC presidential primary. His answer was not hedged, it was not qualified, it was not surrounded by the kind of diplomatic language that Nigerian politicians use when they want to appear cooperative while actually committing to nothing. He said yes. He said any winner. He said, of course, if Obi is a contender. And when the anchor pressed further, noting that Obi had previously served as his running mate in 2019, which would make a reversal of that hierarchy awkward, Atiku said, what is difficult there? It is democracy. It is either you go through consensus or you go through election. This statement needs to be understood for what it is and what it is not. What it is not a formal withdrawal from the presidential race. Atiku has not announced that he is pulling out of contention for the ADC ticket. He is a contender, he has infrastructure, he has northern networks. He remains one of the ADC coalition's primary political assets. This is not a concession speech. What it is a public pre-commitment to coalition discipline. It is Atiku telling 3 audiences simultaneously: the obedient movement, whose energy his coalition needs, the ADC internal leadership, who must manage the primary process, and Tinubu's political management team, who is watching, that the scenario they have been hoping for, Atiku and Obi fracturing over the presidential ticket and splitting the opposition vote exactly as they did in 2023, is not the scenario that is coming. Why Atiku made this statement now? The political logic. Atiku is 78 years old. He has contested the Nigerian presidency 6 times. The conventional political analysis of his ADC engagement has been he's trying one more time, he will not yield the presidential slot, and when the ticket question becomes unavoidable, the coalition will fracture the same way every Nigerian opposition coalition has fractured before it, on the ego of its most senior figure. The April 15 statement demolishes that analysis, and the reason it demolishes it is not because Atiku has suddenly become selfless. Nigerian political actors of Atiku's stature do not make public pre-commitments of this magnitude out of altruism. They make them because a calculation has been concluded. The calculation is this. Atiku understands at 78 that the obedient movement, the 6 million vote organic mobilization force that Peter Obi brought to the 2023 election, does not transfer to an Atiku-led ticket. The diaspora funding machine follows Obi personally. The youth energy follows Obi personally. The cross-ethnic appeal that makes the ADC coalition genuinely threatening to Tinubu is concentrated in Obi's candidacy in a way that Atiku's candidacy cannot replicate. An Atiku-led ADC ticket in 2027 is a sophisticated, well-resourced opposition campaign that probably finishes second. An Obi-led ADC ticket with Atiku's northern machine behind it, with Atiku's active support rather than his grudging acquiescence, is a ticket that, depending on the running mate selection, reaches the constitutional threshold in the range we have previously documented, 24 to 28 states. The difference between those two scenarios for Atiku is the difference between his 6th presidential loss and his 1st presidential contribution that actually changes Nigerian history. And at 78, the second outcome is more attractive than the first. The specific deal that produced this Atiku concession, what Obi has offered Atiku for the presidential slot, and how the succession question, the 4-year term commitment, is being structured will be addressed in later as we go on. The constitutional arithmetic of what a Peter Obi presidential ticket actually needs in a running mate, geographically, politically, and organizationally, will be built before the running mate name is revealed. Building the constitutional arithmetic before revealing the name. This channel does not reveal names before building the analysis that explains why the name makes strategic sense. Because if you understand what an Obi presidential ticket mathematically needs, the running mate choice becomes not a revelation but a logical conclusion. Peter Obi won 6,101,533 votes in 2023. He won the Southeast comprehensively. He reached or approached the 25% constitutional threshold in the South-South. He demonstrated extraordinary cross-ethnic reach in northern urban centers, Kano Municipal, Kaduna North, Kaduna South, Jos North. His FCT performance was the best of any presidential candidate. What his 2023 campaign structurally lacked and what cost him the 18 additional state threshold he needed was organized ward-level rural northern delivery. The northern urban centers voted for him as individuals responding to his governance message. The northern rural vote, the mass of organized party machine-delivered votes in the northwest and northeast, did not convert to him because there was no party infrastructure to make that conversion. In 2027, Atiku's northern machine fills that gap at the top level. Atiku's active support gives Obi credibility and access in northern state capitals and northern political establishments that his personal campaign could not have generated. But Atiku's support is not the same as northern infrastructure on the ticket. A presidential candidate's running mate is the organizational anchor in the regions where the presidential candidate is weakest. The 5 requirements for the Obi running mate. Requirement 1. The running mate must be from the north, specifically from the northwest or northeast, the 2 zones where the constitutional threshold arithmetic is most uncertain for an Obi-led coalition. A southern running mate on an Obi ticket doubles down on the southeast and south-south base without solving the northern delivery problem. That is not a ticket architecture, it is a geography problem in a different outfit. Requirement 2. The running mate must have a personal political network, not just a borrowed network that operates independently of Atiku's infrastructure. The strategic risk of a ticket that depends entirely on Atiku's northern delivery is that if Atiku's cooperation becomes less enthusiastic at any point in the campaign, the ticket's northern delivery capacity degrades. A running mate with a structural northern base provides structural insurance. Requirement 3. The running mate must be Muslim. Peter Obi is a Catholic Christian from the southeast. a Christian ticket on the Archon in 2027, in a political environment where Muslim northern voters are being asked to make a cross-ethnic choice, introduces a religious barrier that makes the northern threshold achievement harder than it already is. The constitutional threshold mathematics require northern Muslim voters to actively support the ticket. A Muslim running mate removes the religious barrier for those voters. Requirement 4. The running mate must have administrative credibility, a governance record that allows the ticket to present itself as experienced and competent, not merely as an opposition protest vehicle. The APC's incumbency advantage includes the narrative of governmental experience. An Obi ticket with a running mate whose governance resume is thin gives the APC a comparison it wins easily. Requirement 5. The running mate must be acceptable to Atiku. This is not a courtesy requirement, it is a structural one. If Atiku's concession of the presidential slot is conditional on his comfort with the running mate, and political concessions of this magnitude always carry implicit conditions, then Obi's running mate selection must be someone Atiku can actively support rather than merely tolerate. A running mate who represents a political faction or personal network that Atiku considers threatening to his own post-election interests will not receive Atiku's full machine support.
Before we reveal the name, consider this. The most common mistake in Nigerian political punditry on running mate selection is treating it as a patronage decision. It is not. It is a constitutional arithmetic decision disguised as a political one. Every running mate who does not add ward-level delivery capacity in the states where the presidential candidate is weakest is a running mate who is aesthetically satisfying and operationally useless. The Obi running mate must add the specific northern rural delivery capacity that neither Obi's personal appeal nor Atiku's network can fully provide, because Atiku's network, while deep, is concentrated in the northeast and parts of the northwest, and it is a network that delivers for Atiku. Getting it to fully deliver for Obi requires the additional motivating factor of a running mate whose personal political interests are aligned with that delivery. Identity, geography, and personal political incentive must all point in the same direction. Those three requirements converging on one person is what makes a running mate choice transformative rather than merely symbolic. The name and why it matches every requirement. The running mate intelligence converging from multiple ADC coalition sources, confirmed by Obi's own public statement that he is working with Kwankwaso so he can back me, and by the January 2026 Daily Trust report that Kwankwaso's VP candidacy was emerging as the strongest possibility on an Obi ticket, points to Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, former governor of Kano State, twice governor 2003-2007 and 2011-2015, former Minister of Defense under President Jonathan, leader of the Kwankwasia movement, a disciplined, funded, ward-level political organization whose membership is estimated at 1.5 million Kano-centered supporters, presidential candidate in 2023 who received 1,496,687 votes, the fourth highest total in the election, and who delivered his home state of Kano with a margin that demonstrated genuine grassroots machine capacity. Northwest, check. Independent political network, check. Muslim, check. Administrative credibility, check. Acceptable to Atiku, the most complex of the 5 requirements and the one that will determine whether this deal holds. We will address it in Section 4. The deal that produced the Atiku concession. A political concession of the magnitude that Atiku made on April 15th is not produced by goodwill. It is produced by a negotiation, and a negotiation of this kind between two men whose combined 2023 vote total was 13 million, between them who have the northern machine and the organic mobilization capacity to constitute a genuine presidential threat, has specific terms. The terms that multiple sources have placed in the reporting record, including the Punch's sources who documented the UK meeting between Atiku and Obi, are the following. First,
Obi accepts the presidential slot. He campaigns as the ADC's presidential candidate. His name, his brand, his obedient movement energy, and his diaspora funding machine are the coalition's primary mobilization assets. Second, Obi commits to a single 4-year term. This is the specific concession that Obi himself publicly offered. He said, on the record, that he would be willing to leave office by May 28, 2031 if a term restriction agreement is reached. A 4-year term for Obi means that power returns to the north after 2031, which is the political compensation that makes Atiku's support for a southern president possible to sell to his northern political network. Third, Atiku's network actively campaigns for the Obi Kwankwaso ticket in the northeast and Adamawa, his home territory, rather than delivering a passive non-interference. Active support means Atiku's state-level coordinators, local government chairman relationships, and northeast political infrastructure deploy in favor of the ticket. That is categorically different from Atiku simply stepping aside and letting the ticket sink or swim without his operational involvement. Fourth, the coalition's post-election governance architecture, which ministerial zones, which Senate leadership, which federal board appointments are allocated to which coalition members, is pre-negotiated before the campaign begins. This is the most complex and most sensitive element of any Nigerian opposition coalition agreement, because it is the promise that keeps coalition members from defecting mid-campaign when the APC's co-optation strategy begins offering individual inducements.
What Kwankwaso gets and why he would accept the running mate position. Kwankwaso offered to be Obi's running mate as far back as 2024 in a viral video interview, with conditions. The conditions he stated publicly. He acknowledged being bigger than Obi politically, being an elder, being a PhD holder, performing better as governor. These were negotiating positions, not sincere objections. They were the public framing that allows him to accept the running mate position without appearing to have simply submitted to Obi's hierarchy. What Kwankwaso actually gets from this deal is more valuable than the vice presidency itself. The Kwankwasia movement becomes the operational anchor of the ADC's northern campaign. His 1.5 million Kano-centered supporters are no longer the rump of a fourth-place presidential candidate. They are the core of a national opposition coalition's northern delivery machine. His political relevance, which was declining after the loss of Kano state governorship to the APC through Abba Kabir Yusuf's defection, is fully restored and nationally amplified. And there is a longer-term calculation. A Kwankwaso who serves as vice president under Obi's single-term commitment is a Kwankwaso who is constitutionally positioned to become the northern presidential candidate of the coalition's successor arrangement in 2031. He does not yield his presidential ambition. He defers it in exchange for the institutional positioning that makes it achievable. Where the deal could break, the 3 fault lines. Fault line 1. Atiku's active support versus passive non-interference. The deal requires Atiku to actively campaign for Obi Kwankwaso, but Atiku's network of governors, senators, and local government chairmen are loyal to Atiku as a patron, and their patron is telling them to deliver for someone who is not Atiku. The transmission of that instruction through multiple layers of a political machine built on personal loyalty to one man is not guaranteed. Atiku can make the concession. Whether his machine fully executes on it depends on decisions that Atiku does not fully control. Fault line 2. The Atiku-Kwankwaso relationship. These two men have a complicated political history. Kwankwaso served under Jonathan as Minister of Defense and has navigated multiple political transitions with a pragmatism that sometimes put him in opposition to Atiku's factional interests. A coalition in which Atiku is the essential northern patron and Kwankwaso is the running mate requires those two political egos to operate in the same organizational space without fracturing. Their personal relationship is the most fragile element of the entire deal architecture. Fault line 3. The obedient movement's acceptance of the running mate. The obedient movement is not Obi's political machine. It is a decentralized network of young, educated, urban Nigerians whose primary commitment is to a governance quality standard, not to any party or alliance structure. Kwankwaso is a northern establishment politician. He is associated with the political class that the obedient movement was energized in opposition to. Whether the obedient voter who chose Obi in 2023 as an anti-establishment signal
will remain energized behind an Obi Kwankwaso ticket that includes former governors, former ministers, and ex-party power brokers is the demand-side uncertainty that no-deal architecture fully resolves. Before we get to what Tinubu's Aso Rock is doing right now in response to this emerging deal, drop a comment. Tell me, do you think the Obi Kwankwaso ticket can keep the obedient movement's energy intact, or does the coalition establishment around it dilute the brand that makes Obi's votes possible? That debate belongs in the comments before I give you the Aso Rock response. The 4 moves Tinubu's political management team is making right now. Aso Rock's political management team is not sleeping. They have been monitoring the ADC coalition's ticket architecture since Obi joined the party on December 31, 2025. The Atiku concession of April 15th is not a surprise to them. They've had intelligence on the UK meeting between Atiku and Obi and the broad contours of the deal. What has changed is that the deal is now public, and a deal that is public has a different political weight than a deal that is private. The Tinubu administration must now respond not to a rumor, but to a confirmed opposition architecture.
Move 1. The Kwankwaso intercept. The most important strategic counter-move available to the Tinubu administration is the Kwankwaso intercept, the attempt to pull Kwankwaso out of the Obi coalition before the deal is formally sealed. This is not speculative. The reporting record shows that Kano State Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf, Kwankwaso's political protege who defected to the APC in early 2026, was delivered to the APC through a process that Kwankwaso publicly opposed. The APC has already demonstrated that it can fracture the Kwankwasia movement by separating Yusuf from Kwankwaso. The question is whether it can extend that fracturing to Kwankwaso himself. The offer on the table, according to sources monitoring APC-Kwankwaso discussions, include federal ministerial appointments for Kwankwaso's allies, restoration of federal infrastructure investment in Kano State, and the promise of APC support for Kwankwasia-aligned candidates in the 2027 National Assembly elections. Whether these inducements are sufficient to pull Kwankwaso away from an opportunity that positions him as Nigeria's vice president and set him up for the 2031 presidential conversation is the central question of the ADC coalition's next 90 days. Move 2. The ADC portal crisis, the annexed deportalization, and the competing court proceedings is not resolved. As long as the ADC cannot formally conduct an ANEC-observed primary, the Obi presidential candidacy and the Obi Kwankwaso ticket cannot be constitutionally operationalized. The Tinubu administration's most effective counter to the emerging deal is not a political argument against it. The political argument is losing in the court of public opinion. It is the administrative and legal architecture that prevents the deal from being converted into a certified primary candidate before the 2027 primary window closes. Move 3. The narrative warfare. Presidential aide Bayo Onanuga described Obi as a politician who lacks the leadership pedigree to govern Nigeria. Minister Festus Keyamo has claimed that Obi has already accepted a vice presidential role under Atiku and is deceiving his supporters. These are coordinated narrative deployments designed to undermine Obi's outsider brand among the obedient movement by framing him as a conventional political dealmaker rather than a governance reformer. The specific targeting of the Atiku vice presidency rumor, which Obi publicly and emphatically denied, was designed to make the obedient base question whether Obi would compromise his presidential ambition for establishment acceptance. Now that the Atiku concession is public, with Obi clearly on the presidential track and not the running mate track, that specific narrative attack has collapsed. The APC must now contend with an opposition ticket architecture that places Obi in the presidential slot with establishment machine support behind him, which is precisely what they were trying to prevent. Move 4. Economic delivery, the only counter that actually works. Onanuga, Keyamo, and the APC's media apparatus can attack Obi's candidacy daily for the next 18 months. None of those attacks will matter if the economic grievance that drives opposition sentiment in 2027 remains as acute as it is today. The Tinubu administration's only durable counter to an Obi Kwankwaso ticket the one that changes the electoral arithmetic regardless of coalition architecture, is measurable economic improvement before the campaign season opens. Fuel price reduction, naira stabilization, security improvement in the Middle Belt and Northwest. These are not political management strategies, they are governance outcomes, and they are the only ones that shift the voter whose economic suffering the opposition coalition's most powerful recruiting argument.
The constitutional arithmetic of Obi Kwankwaso. We said we would build the constitutional arithmetic before revealing the name. The conclusion of that arithmetic is this: a Peter Obi presidential ticket with Kwankwaso as running mate, backed by Atiku's active northern machine, assembles the exact combination that the 2023 opposition was missing. Obi's organic mobilization, plus Atiku's northeast and northwest relationships, plus Kwankwaso's independent Kano infrastructure, plus the obedient movement's diaspora funding capacity is not an additive combination, it is multiplicative. The urban northern performance Obi demonstrated in 2023 isolated islands of threshold range votes in Kano Municipal, Kaduna North, Jos North, becomes deliverable state-level threshold achievement when Kwankwaso's rural Kano machine is added to it. That specific combination, Obi's urban Kano votes plus Kwankwaso's rural Kano delivery, gives the coalition Kano State. And a coalition that wins Kano has crossed one of the hardest northern constitutional threshold requirements available. The 5 signals to watch before the primary window. First, whether Kwankwaso makes a public statement endorsing or engaging with the ADC coalition in the next 30 days. Kwankwaso's public silence on the Obi-ADC development has been conspicuous. The APC is actively courting him. His next public statement on the 2027 coalition question is the single most important signal of the deal status. Second, whether Atiku converts his April 15 public pre-commitment into operational machine deployment, meaning whether Atiku's state coordinators in Adamawa, Taraba, Gombe, and the Northeast begin publicly aligning their activities with the ADC coalition's 2027 program. Verbal concessions are cheap. Machine deployment is the expensive, visible evidence of genuine commitment. Third, the ADC portal injunction ruling. No running mate, no ticket architecture, no coalition arithmetic matters if the ADC cannot formally receive members and conduct an INEC-observed primary. The court is the most important actor in the 2027 opposition timeline. Its ruling on the portal access injunction, expected within the next 60 days, determines whether the coalition can operationalize its architecture or remains politically assembled but administratively stranded. Fourth, whether Obi publicly names Kwankwaso or any running mate before the primary. A pre-primary running mate announcement is a rare move in Nigerian politics, but it would serve a specific strategic function for Obi. It would signal to northern voters that the Obi ticket has a northern anchor before they are asked to commit, which reduces the threshold crossing uncertainty that currently makes some northern political actors cautious about ADC alignment. Fifth, Tinubu's economic trajectory in the next 6 months. If the naira stabilizes measurably and fuel prices reduce before mid-2026, the economic grievance that the opposition's most powerful recruitment tool weakens. If the economic situation continues at its current trajectory of acute cost of living pressure, the electoral environment that an Obi Kwankwaso ticket would campaign into is the most favorable opposition environment since 2015. Best case and worst case. Best case, the ADC portal injunction is granted within 60 days, Kwankwaso formally aligned with the coalition within 30 days, the Obi Kwankwaso ticket is announced before the primary season, Atiku's machine deploys actively in the Northeast, the obedient movement's diaspora funding flows toward the ADC, and the 4-year term agreement with Atiku is formalized in writing. In this scenario, the ADC coalition enters the 2027 primary season with the most operationally complete presidential ticket Nigeria's opposition has assembled since Obasanjo Atiku in 1999. Worst case, Kwankwaso is intercepted by the APC's offer before formally committing to the ADC, the portal crisis is not resolved before the primary window, Atiku's verbal concession does not translate into machine deployment,
and the Obedient Movement's activists conclude that the coalition's establishment composition has diluted the brand that motivated their 2023 participation. In this scenario, the April 15 Atiku statement becomes a historical footnote, a political signal that briefly reorganized the 2027 opposition architecture before the structural obstacles that have defeated every previous opposition coalition reasserted themselves. We began with a breaking development. Atiku's public pre-commitment to step aside for Peter Obi, a statement made April 15, 2026, less than 24 hours before this analysis was built. The running mate intelligence converging from multiple sources points to Kwankwaso, a name that satisfies all 5 ticket requirements: Northwest origin, independent political network, Muslim identity, administrative credibility, and Atiku compatibility. The deal architecture: Obi on a single 4-year term, Atiku's active machine support, Kwankwaso's independent northern delivery, post-election governance allocation pre-negotiated, is the most sophisticated opposition coalition engineering Nigeria has seen since democracy was restored in 1999. The deal that could shock all Nigerians is not simply the ticket. It is the logic behind it, that the 2 men who most needed to resolve their political hierarchy, Atiku, who has run 6 times and will never be president, and Obi, who got 6 million votes with no machine and needs a machine to finish the work, have apparently concluded that neither of them wins alone, but together, with Kwankwaso's Kano infrastructure as the northern anchor, they have the most credible path to the presidency that any Nigerian opposition has assembled since democracy was restored in 1999. Whether the path holds depends on the 5 signals. Watch the portal court, watch Kwankwaso's next statement, watch whether Atiku's machine moves, not just his words, and watch whether the obedient voter who voted for an outsider in 2023 can be convinced that an outsider surrounded by insiders is still the outsider they voted for. You now have the full deal, from the Atiku concession, to the running mate logic, to the coalition architecture, to the Aso Rock response. Share this analysis. The 2027 conversation is not in 2027, it is right now. AFRONEWSHQ. Nigeria deserves better analysis. See you in the next one.